Khadija collapsed on the cold hospital pavement, her hands still trembling after paying every last coin she had to save a dying beggar no one else would touch. Inside, doctors fought to keep the old man alive. Outside, no one stopped for her. At that exact moment, a convoy of black SUVs sped past the gates inside, sat Obinna Adeyemi, a powerful CEO still searching for the father who vanished years ago. He didn't see the girl who had just saved his world. He didn't know the man fighting for his life inside was the one he had lost. And Khadija had no idea her sacrifice was about to change everything. Before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it there? If stories like this move, you don't forget to subscribe and be part of this journey. Khadija Musa had long learned that life did not pause for the tired, the poor, or the unseen. Each morning in Lagos began the same way for her, with a quiet struggle that no one applauded and no one noticed. Before the sun rose over the rusted rooftops of Makoko's edge, Khadija was already awake, crouched beside a small charcoal stove, blowing gently into the flames to coax them into life. The smoke curled into her eyes, making them water, but she did not complain. Tears in her world were wasted energy. Behind her, on a thin foam mattress pressed against a cracked wall, her mother Hawa Musa coughed softly in her sleep. It was a dry, lingering cough that had become the background rhythm of their lives, always there, always reminding Khadija that time was not on their side. Khadija paused, glancing over her shoulder. For a moment, she simply watched her mother breathe. Hawa had once been strong. She had once sold vegetables in the market, her laughter bright and contagious. But illness had taken that from her slowly, cruelly, without warning. Now she was frail. Her body weakened, her voice often no more than a whisper. Khadija stirred the pot of watery porridge and swallowed the heaviness in her chest. She could not afford to break. "Khadija." Hawa's voice came faintly from behind. "I'm here," Mama Khadija replied, immediately setting the spoon aside and moving closer. "You should rest." Hawa smiled weakly. "You always wake before the sun. Even the birds are still dreaming." Khadija forced a gentle smile. "Someone has to beat them," she said softly. But both of them knew the truth. Khadija did not wake early out of discipline. She woke early because survival demanded it. By the time the first light stretched across the narrow alleyways, Khadija had already left the house. She carried a small tray balanced carefully on her head, filled with sachets of water, ground nuts, and a few pieces of fried akara she had managed to make. Her feet moved quickly, weaving through the busy streets as Lagos began to awaken. Honking cars, shouting traders, the hum of generators. Life surged forward without mercy. Khadija stepped into traffic with practiced precision, offering her goods to drivers waiting at the junction. "Water, cold water," she called, her voice steady despite the exhaustion that clung to her bones. Some ignored her completely. Some waved her away impatiently. A few bought from her without even meeting her eyes. It was always like this. Invisible yet necessary, human yet overlooked. By midday, the sun burned fiercely overhead, pressing down on the city like a weight. Sweat soaked through Khadija's faded dress, clinging to her skin. Her arms ached from balancing the tray, but she did not stop. She couldn't. Every coin mattered. Every naira brought her one step closer to buying medicine for her mother. Or at least that was what she told herself. In truth, the money was never enough. Never. Later that afternoon, Khadija rushed to her second job, a small roadside food stall owned by a woman named Madam Bisi. The stall was always crowded, filled with the smell of fried oil and spicy stew. "Khadija, you're late," Madam Bisi snapped as soon as she saw her. "I'm sorry," Ma Khadija said quickly, setting down her tray. "The traffic was, I don't want excuses." Madam Bisi cut her off sharply. "Customers don't pay for excuses." Khadija lowered her eyes. "Yes, Ma." She tied a worn apron around her waist and got to work immediately, washing plates, serving food, wiping tables. Her hands moved quickly, efficiently, without hesitation. But no matter how hard she worked, it was never enough. Faster, Madame Bisi shouted. Are you sleeping, no, ma? Then move. Khadija swallowed her pride and kept going. This was how her days passed. Work, endure, repeat. No complaints, no rest. No one to defend her. As the sun dipped lower and the sky turned a soft orange, the crowd at the stall began to thin. Khadija's legs trembled from exhaustion, but she forced herself to stay upright. She needed this job. Without it, there would be nothing. When Madame Bisi finally handed her a few crumpled notes at the end of the shift, Khadija accepted them with both hands. Thank you, ma. Madame Bisi barely looked at her. Don't be late tomorrow. Yes, ma. Khadija stepped out into the evening air, clutching the small amount of money tightly. It wasn't much, but it was something. It had to be enough. As she walked back through the crowded streets, the noise of Lagos softened into a distant hum. The sky darkened slowly, and streetlights flickered on one by one. Khadija's steps slowed. Her body was beyond tired, but her mind kept moving, calculating, worrying, hoping. Medicine, rent, food. There was never enough for all three. Something always had to be sacrificed. Tonight, it would be food. Again. She turned into a quieter road, one less crowded, where the noise of the city faded into a dull echo. The air felt different here, still almost heavy. Khadija hugged her arms around herself as she walked. That was when she saw him. At first, it was just a shape. A dark figure lying awkwardly near the roadside, half hidden in shadow. Khadija slowed. Her heart tightened slightly. People lay on the streets all the time in Lagos, some drunk, some sleeping, some aren't forgotten. She could keep walking. Most people would, most people did. Khadija took another step forward, then another. She told herself not to look, not to get involved. She had nothing to give, nothing to spare. But something in the stillness of that figure felt wrong. Too still, too quiet. Khadija stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen between fear and instinct. Then slowly, she turned back. Each step toward the figure felt heavier than the last. "What are you doing?" a voice in her mind whispered. "You can't help everyone." But her feet kept moving. When she got closer, the dim light from a nearby street lamp revealed the truth. It was an old man. His clothes were torn, dirty, barely hanging onto his thin frame. His beard was unkempt, his skin lined with age and hardship. One arm lay twisted beneath him, and his chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. Khadija's heart dropped. "Sir," she called softly, kneeling beside him. No response. She reached out, hesitating for a split second before touching his shoulder. "Sir, can you hear me?" The man did not move, but his breathing, it was wrong. Too weak, too slow. Khadija's pulse quickened. This wasn't someone resting. This was someone dying. She looked around quickly. The street was nearly empty. A few people passed by in the distance, but none came close. None stopped. None cared. Khadija swallowed hard. Her fingers tightened slightly. She knew what this meant. If she walked away now, no one would blame her. No one would even remember. But if she stayed, her eyes dropped to the small bundle of money in her hand, everything she had worked for that day. Her mother's medicine, her survival, her future. Khadija closed her eyes for a brief moment. Then she looked back at the old man, and in that silent, fragile space between fear and compassion, she made a choice. Khadija did not realize she was holding her breath until her chest began to ache. The old man's shallow breathing scraped against the silence of the empty road, each breath sounding weaker than the last. It was not the kind of breathing that waited for help. It was the kind that faded, slowly, quietly, until it was gone. She looked around again. Still no one, A motorbike passed in the distance, its headlights sweeping briefly across them before disappearing into the night. Somewhere far off, laughter echoed. Life continued, but here on this dim stretch of road, time felt like it had stopped. "Sir, please," Khadija whispered, her voice trembling as she gently tapped his shoulder again. No response. Her heart began to pound harder. She had seen sickness before. She had watched her mother weaken day by day. She knew what it looked like when a body was fighting to stay alive. And this man, he was losing. Khadija swallowed. Her fingers tightened around the crumpled notes in her hand. Everything she had. She could still walk away. No one would know. No one would judge her. She was just a poor girl trying to survive. No one expected her to save anyone. But then, another thought came. If this were Mama, if her mother were lying here helpless, abandoned, struggling to breathe, would she want someone to walk away? Khadija's eyes filled with sudden tears. No, she whispered to herself, shaking her head. Her decision snapped into place. "I won't leave you," she said softly, more to herself than to the man. Carefully, she slipped her arm under his shoulders, trying to lift him slightly. He was lighter than she expected, fragile, like something that had already begun to break. "Sir, you have to hold on." "Please," she murmured, but lifting him alone was nearly impossible. Khadija looked down the road desperately, her voice rising. "Help! Please, someone help!" A woman carrying a basket slowed briefly, glanced at them, then shook her head and walked faster. "I'm sorry," she muttered without stopping. A group of young men passed by, laughing loudly. One of them looked over. "Leave him," he said casually. "Probably drunk or mad." "He's not drunk," Khadija shouted, her voice breaking. "He's dying." They shrugged. "Not our problem." And just like that, they were gone. Khadija's chest tightened painfully. For a moment, despair crept in. What if she couldn't save him? What if she was too late? Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her grip on the old man. No. She pushed the thought away. She had to try. With all the strength she could gather, Khadija dragged him carefully toward the edge of the road, where passing vehicles might see them. Her arms burned, her back screamed, but she did not stop. "Please, someone," she whispered hoarsely. Minutes passed. Then finally, a car slowed. Hope flickered in her chest as she waved frantically. "Please, please help!" The car rolled down its window slightly. A well-dressed man leaned out, his expression cautious. "What is it?" "He's dying," Khadija said quickly. "Please, we need to get him to a hospital." The man glanced at the old beggar, his face tightening with discomfort. "I don't want trouble," he said, already pulling the window back up. "Wait," Khadija cried, stepping closer. "Please, he needs help." But the car drove off, just like the others. Khadija stood there, frozen. Her hope cracked. Her voice fell into a whisper. "Why?" Her eyes burned, but she forced the tears back. Crying wouldn't save him. Action would. She looked down at the old man again. His breathing had grown even weaker. There was no more time. Khadija made a decision. If no one would help them, she would do it herself. She waved down the next passing vehicle, a worn-out tricycle, its engine sputtering loudly as it approached. "Stop, please stop," she shouted. The driver slowed reluctantly. "What do you want?" he asked, eyeing the situation suspiciously. "I need to take him to the hospital," Khadija said, breathless. "Please, I'll pay you." The driver frowned. "That man. He looks like he's already gone." "He's not," Khadija insisted. "Please, I'm begging you." The driver hesitated, glancing around as if expecting trouble. "It will cost you," he said finally. Khadija didn't even ask how much. "I'll pay," she said quickly. 5,000 naira. Her heart dropped. That was everything she had. Everything. For a split second, she hesitated. That money was meant for her mother's medicine. Without it, Hawa might suffer. Might get worse. Khadija's fingers tightened slowly around the notes in her hand. Her mind raced. 2 lives. Two people she could not save at the same time. The weight of the choice pressed down on her chest, stealing her breath. "Make it quick," the driver said impatiently. "I don't have all night." Khadija closed her eyes. In that moment, everything else faded. The noise, the fear, the exhaustion. All that remained was the fragile life in front of her. She opened her eyes again and handed over the money. "Please," she said softly, "just help me." The driver took the cash without another word. Together they lifted the old man into the back of the tricycle. Khadija climbed in beside him, cradling his head carefully in her lap. "Hold on," she whispered, brushing dirt gently from his face. "We're going to get you help." The tricycle roared to life and sped into the night. The journey felt endless. Every bump in the road made the old man's body jolt slightly, and each time Khadija's heart leapt in fear. "Stay with me," she murmured again and again. The city lights blurred past them. The air grew colder, and still. The man did not respond. Khadija's voice cracked. "Please don't die. Not now." By the time they reached the hospital gates, Khadija's hands were shaking uncontrollably. "We're here," the driver shouted. Before the tricycle had fully stopped, Khadija was already moving. "Help, please," she cried, as she struggled to support the old man's weight. Two security guards looked over, their expressions immediately wary. "What's going on here?" one of them asked. "He's dying," Khadija said desperately. "Please, we need help." The guards exchanged a look. Then one of them stepped forward, blocking her path. "Where are his documents?" Khadija blinked. "What? His ID? Medical records? Payment details," the guard said flatly. "I don't have any of that," Khadija said, her voice rising. "I just found him. He needs help now." The guard shook his head. "This is a private hospital. We don't admit patients without proper documentation." Khadija felt the ground shift beneath her. "No, please. You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "He's going to die." "Take him to a government hospital," the other guard added dismissively. "That's too far," Khadija cried. "He won't survive the trip." The guards did not move, did not soften, did not care. Khadija's chest tightened painfully as panic surged through her. She looked down at the old man. His breathing was barely there now, fading, slipping away. And suddenly, something inside her broke. "Please," she shouted, her voice raw with desperation. "I'll do anything, just save him." Her words echoed in the night air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a voice spoke from behind them. "Let her through." Khadija turned sharply. A young doctor stood at the entrance, his expression serious as he took in the scene. The guards hesitated. "But Doctor, I said let her through," he repeated firmly. Khadija didn't wait. She rushed past them, her heart pounding wildly as hope flickered once more. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. The bright hospital lights felt almost unreal after the darkness of the street. Khadija stumbled forward, her legs trembling as she followed the young doctor through the glass doors. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, sharp and clean, a stark contrast to the dust and sweat that clung to her skin. "Lay him here," the doctor said quickly, pointing to a narrow examination bed. Khadija and one of the reluctant orderlies lifted the old man onto the bed. His body sagged, lifeless, his breathing barely visible now. "Pulse?" the doctor asked. "Very weak," a nurse replied, after checking. "Almost gone." Khadija's heart clenched painfully. "No, please," she whispered, stepping closer. The doctor turned to her briefly. His face was calm, but his eyes carried urgency. "What's his name?" he asked. I don't know," Khadija admitted, her voice shaking. "I found him on the road." The nurse paused, exchanging a glance with the doctor. "No name," she repeated quietly. "No documents," either one of the guards added from the doorway, as if that detail mattered more than the man's fading life. The doctor's jaw tightened. "Forget the documents," he said firmly. "We don't let someone die because of paperwork." "But, sir, hospital policy," the nurse began. "I am aware of the policy," he interrupted. "And I'm choosing to save a life." There was something in his voice that silenced the room. "Prepare oxygen," he ordered. "And get a line in now." The team moved quickly. Machines beeped to life. A mask was placed over the old man's face. An IV needle slid into his thin arm. Khadija stood frozen at the edge of the room, her hands clasped tightly together. She didn't understand everything they were doing, but she understood enough. This was a fight between life and death. And she had brought him here just in time. Or maybe not. Minutes passed, or maybe it was seconds. Time no longer made sense. Khadija's eyes never left the old man's face. His features were worn, deeply lined, like someone who had carried too many years and too many burdens. Who had he been before this? Did anyone love him? Was there someone out there waiting for him? Like she had rushed for her own mother countless times. "Pressure is dropping," the nurse said. The doctor's movements became sharper. "Increase the oxygen. Prepare adrenaline." Khadija felt her breath catch. Was he slipping away? "No. Please," she whispered again, her voice barely audible. Suddenly, the machine gave a sharp, uneven sound. The nurse looked up. "We're losing him." The doctor didn't hesitate. "Start compressions." Khadija's eyes widened as the doctor pressed his hands firmly against the old man's chest, rhythmically pushing, forcing life back into a body that seemed ready to give up. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. "Stay with me." Each compression felt like a blow to Khadija's heart. Each second stretched into agony. The room filled with tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Adrenaline ready, give it. A syringe plunged into the IV. The machine continued its erratic beeping. Then, silence. A flat, continuous tone cut through the air. Khadija's world stopped. "No," she whispered, stepping forward without realizing. Her vision blurred as tears filled her eye. "Please, don't let him die." The doctor did not stop. Again, he said, continuing the compressions. 1, 2, 3. The seconds dragged on. Then suddenly, a beep. Sharp, clear, alive. The nurse gasped slightly. "We have a pulse." Khadija's knees nearly gave way. Air rushed back into her lungs as if she had been underwater. "He's back," the doctor said, stepping away slowly. "Stabilize him." The tension in the room shifted. The fight, for now, had been won. Khadija pressed her hand to her chest, her heart racing wildly. She didn't even realize she was crying until a tear slipped down her cheek. Alive. He was alive. The doctor turned toward her, removing his gloves. "You brought him in just in time," he said. Khadija shook her head slightly. "No. You saved him." The doctor gave a small, tired smile. "We both did." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the nurse approached her, expression more serious now. "Doctor," she said quietly, "we still need to address the issue of payment." Khadija's stomach dropped instantly. Payment, of course. Nothing in this world came without a price. The doctor glanced at Khadija, then back at the nurse. "She'll handle it," he said. The words hit Khadija like a weight. She stepped forward slowly, her voice uncertain. "How much will it cost?" The nurse hesitated, then named an amount. It was more than Khadija had ever held in her hands at once, more than she could earn in months. Her fingers tightened slightly at her sides. I already gave everything I had to bring him here," she said quietly. The nurse's expression hardened. "This is a private hospital. Treatment is not free." "I understand," Khadija said quickly, her voice trembling. "I'll find a way. Please, just don't stop treating him." The nurse exchanged a look with another staff member. "Without payment, we cannot continue long-term care," she said. Khadija felt the fragile hope inside her begin to crack. "You're going to let him die?" "After saving him," she asked, softly, disbelief in her voice. No one is saying that, the nurse replied defensively, but this is not a charity. Khadija swallowed hard. Her mind raced. There had to be something she could do. I'll work, she said suddenly. I'll clean cook anything. Just let me stay here and help pay for his treatment. The nurse blinked, surprised. That's not how this works. Then tell me how it works. Khadija's voice broke the desperation spilling out. Because I'm not leaving him to die. The room fell silent. Even the machines seemed quieter. The doctor stepped forward again, his expression thoughtful. What's your name? He asked gently. Khadija, she replied. He nodded slowly. Khadija, this man is lucky you found him. Khadija shook her head. I don't know if that's true yet. The doctor studied her for a moment. Then he turned to the nurse. Admit him under emergency care, he said. We'll figure out the rest later, but that's an order. The nurse hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Khadija exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. Thank you, she whispered. The doctor gave a small nod. Stay with him tonight. Sometimes, presence matters more than medicine. Khadija looked at the old man again. His breathing was now steady, assisted by machines. Fragile, but alive. I'm not going anywhere, she said softly. As the staff moved around her, adjusting equipment and writing notes, Khadija pulled a small chair closer to the bed and sat down. Her body was exhausted. Her mind was overwhelmed. But none of that mattered now. She reached out hesitantly and placed her hand lightly over the old man's. His skin was cold, but not lifeless. You're safe now, she whispered. Outside, the city continued its restless rhythm. Cars moved, people laughed, life went on. But inside that quiet hospital room, a stranger's life had been pulled back from the edge. Because one girl refused to walk away. Khadija leaned back slightly, her eyes heavy. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know how she would pay for any of this. She didn't know what would happen to her mother waiting at home. But for now she had done what was right. And somehow, that had to be enough. Across the city, in a world that felt impossibly far from the narrow streets, Khadija walked. Every day, Obina Adeyemi sat at the head of a long glass table, surrounded by power, silence, and expectation. The boardroom overlooked Victoria Island, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing a skyline of ambition, towers of steel and glass, polished and untouchable. Inside, everything was precise, controlled, ordered. Unlike his life, Sir, one of the executives said, carefully sliding a folder across the table, this is the latest update from the private investigators. Obina didn't respond immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the city below, but he wasn't seeing it. He was somewhere else entirely. Sir, the executive repeated. Obina finally turned his expression calm, but there was something heavy behind his eyes. Something that had been there for years. Go on, he said quietly. The room shifted slightly, the tension tightening. The executive cleared his throat. We followed the last reported sighting near Ibadan. Witnesses confirmed that an elderly man matching your father's description was seen months ago, but he disappeared again. Obina's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Months ago, he repeated, Yes, sir. Another silence. A dangerous one. Then you're telling me, Obina said slowly, his voice low but sharp, that after years of searching, after all the resources I've poured into this, we are still chasing shadows. No one answered. No one dared. Obina leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. Do you even understand what this means? He continued. Or is this just another report to you? The executive swallowed. Sir, we are doing everything possible. Everything possible, Obina cut in, his voice rising slightly now. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like nothing is working. The room fell into complete silence. This was the side of Obina Adeyemi the world rarely saw. To the public, he was composed, brilliant, untouchable. But behind closed doors, he was a son who had lost his father, and never found him again. Leave the file, he said, finally his voice returning to a controlled calm. The meeting ended soon after. Chairs scraped softly against the floor as the executives gathered their things, careful not to make eye contact. One by one, they exited the room, leaving Obina alone. The moment the door closed, the silence changed. It became heavier, more personal. Obina reached for the file slowly. His fingers lingered on the edge before opening it. Inside were photographs, blurry images, grainy snapshots taken from a distance. Each one captured a man who might be his father, or might not. He flipped through them one by one, each face similar, each story incomplete, each lead ending in nothing. Obina exhaled slowly, closing his eyes for a brief moment. He could still remember the day everything changed. Years ago, before the wealth had multiplied, before the empire had expanded, back when his father, Pa Adeyemi, had still been there. A strong man, respected, grounded, the kind of man who believed that dignity mattered more than money. And then, one day, he was gone. No explanation, no goodbye, no trace. At first, Obina had believed it was temporary, a misunderstanding, something that would resolve itself. But days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Months into years. And still nothing. Some said his father had chosen to leave. Others whispered darker possibilities. But Obina refused to accept either. Not without proof. Never without proof. A soft knock on the door pulled him back to the present. "Come in," he said. His assistant Chidinma stepped inside carefully. "Sir, the media team is waiting for your approval on the public announcement." Obina nodded slightly. "Bring it up." She placed a tablet in front of him. On the screen was a campaign draft. A nationwide broadcast. Images. Descriptions. A plea. "Have you seen this man? Information about Pa Adeyemi, his age, his features, the last known sighting. A contact number. A reward. A very large reward." Obina stared at the screen for a long moment. "This goes live tonight?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Chidinma replied. "Television, radio, online platforms, everywhere." Obina leaned back again, his expression unreadable. For years he had kept the search quiet, private, controlled. But now he was taking it public, exposing something deeply personal to the entire world. "Do it," he said finally. Chidinma hesitated slightly. "Sir, once this is out, everyone will know." Obina's eyes hardened slightly. "Let them," he said. "If even one person out there has seen him, it's worth it." Chidinma nodded. "Yes, sir." She turned to leave, then paused. "Sir, we'll find him." Obina didn't answer, because hope had become complicated. After she left, Obina stood and walked slowly towards the window. The city stretched endlessly before him. So many people, so many lives, so many stories. Somewhere out there, his father was either alive or gone forever, and the not knowing was the hardest part. His phone buzzed suddenly on the table. Obina turned, picking it up. A message from the head of his investigation team. He opened it. New lead. Possible sighting in Lagos mainland. Matches description closely. Obina's pulse shifted slightly. Lagos mainland. Not far. Not far at all. His grip on the phone tightened. "Prepare the car," he said into the intercom immediately. "Yes, sir," came the response. Within minutes, everything was in motion. Downstairs, a convoy of black SUVs lined up in perfect formation. Security personnel moved with precision. Doors opened. Engines started. Obina stepped into the lead vehicle without hesitation. "Location," he asked. The driver responded quickly. "Coordinate sent, sir. Move." The convoy pulled out into the Lagos traffic, cutting through the chaos with authority. Sirens blared softly. Cars shifted out of the way. People turned to look. Power moved differently in this city, and Obina carried it effortlessly. But inside the vehicle, he was not thinking about power. He was thinking about a possibility, a fragile one, but enough. As the convoy sped through the streets, passing markets, roadside stalls, and crowded intersections, they moved past places where people struggled, places where people were forgotten, places where someone like his father could disappear, unnoticed, unprotected, unremembered. At one intersection, the convoy slowed briefly as traffic shifted. Outside the window, a young girl stood by the roadside selling small items to passing cars. Her clothes were worn, her posture tired, but her eyes determined. For a brief moment, Obinna's gaze lingered. Then the car moved again. The moment passed. He did not know her. He did not know her story. He did not know that somewhere not far from where he was heading, a hospital room held the answer he had been searching for all these years, and that the girl he had just passed and the man fighting for his life were already part of his story. He just hadn't caught up to it yet. The convoy accelerated. The search continued. And fate was quietly aligning everything. Night settled gently over the hospital, but inside the small ward where the old man lay, time seemed suspended between breaths. Khadija had not moved much since the doctors stabilized him. She sat on the hard plastic chair beside the bed, her back slightly hunched, her fingers loosely wrapped around the edge of the mattress. Every now and then she leaned forward just to make sure he was still breathing. Each rise of his chest brought her a quiet relief. Each pause, no matter how brief, tightened something deep inside her. The machines beside him beeped steadily, now a fragile rhythm that filled the silence. Alive. Still alive. Khadija exhaled softly. Her body ached in ways she could no longer count. Her feet throbbed. Her shoulders burned. Her eyes felt heavy, like they might close on their own at any moment. But she refused to sleep. Not yet. Not when he still needed someone there. She glanced toward the door as a nurse passed by, then back at the old man's face. Under the harsh hospital lights, he looked different. Less like a shadow on the roadside. More like someone who had once belonged somewhere. His beard had been cleaned slightly. His face, though still lined and worn, carried traces of dignity that poverty had not completely erased. "Who are you?" Khadija wondered silently. "Who did you used to be?" Her thoughts drifted uninvited toward her mother. Mama would be awake by now, waiting, worried. Khadija's chest tightened. She had left without saying anything. No explanation, no promise of when she would return. And now, she had no money left, no food, no medicine. Guilt crept in slowly like a shadow she could not escape. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered under her breath. But even as the words left her lips, she knew, if she had to choose again, she would still be here. Because leaving this man to die, that would have been something she could never forgive herself for. A soft sound pulled her attention back. Khadija froze. The old man's fingers had moved. Just slightly. She leaned forward immediately, her heart quickening. "Sir," she said softly. His hand twitched again, weak but undeniable. Khadija's eyes widened. "You can hear me?" she asked, hope rising cautiously. There was no clear response, but his breathing shifted. A faint crease appeared on his forehead, like someone trying to fight through a fog. Khadija moved closer, her voice gentle now. "It's okay. You're safe. You're in the hospital." She didn't know if he understood, but she kept talking anyway. Sometimes, words mattered even when they weren't fully heard. Minutes passed. Then slowly, the old man's eyes fluttered. Khadija held her breath. Once, twice, then they opened, barely, clouded, confused, but open. A quiet gasp escaped her lips. "You're awake?" she whispered, almost afraid to believe it. The old man blinked slowly, his gaze unfocused at first. His lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Khadija leaned in closer. "Can you hear me?" she asked. His eyes shifted weakly toward her. For a brief moment, they met. and something passed between them. Not recognition, not yet, but something human, something real. His lips moved again. A faint sound escaped, broken, incomplete. Khadija strained to hear. "What is it?" she asked gently. "Do you need water?" He tried again. This time the sound was clearer, though still fragile. Did... Khadija blinked. "What?" His brow furrowed slightly as if reaching for something just out of reach. The word hung in the air. Incomplete. Unfinished. But heavy with meaning. Khadija felt a small chill run through her. "Aid," she repeated softly. The old man's eyes flickered. Then slowly, they began to close again. "No, wait," Khadija said quickly. "Stay with me, please." But the effort had been too much. His body relaxed once more. The machines continued their steady rhythm. He was not gone. Just slipping back into unconsciousness. Khadija sat there stunned. "Aid," she whispered again. It felt important, like a piece of something bigger. But she didn't know why. Not yet. She leaned back slowly, her mind turning over the word again and again. Aid. Was it a name? A memory? Someone he was calling for, or was it his own? Khadija shook her head slightly. It didn't matter. Not now. What mattered was that he was alive, and he had spoken. That meant something. A sign, maybe. A small step back from the edge. The door opened quietly, and Dr. Ifunanya stepped inside, his eyes immediately going to the patient. "How is he?" he asked. Khadija stood quickly. He woke up. For a moment. The doctor's expression sharpened with interest. "He did. Yes." Khadija nodded. He tried to say something. What did he say? Khadija hesitated. "Aid." Dr. Ifunanya paused. Just for a second. Then he moved closer to the bed, checking the monitors. Could be anything, he said after a moment. Fragments of memory often surface like that. Khadija nodded slowly. But it sounded important, she said quietly. The doctor glanced at her. Sometimes it is, he admitted. Sometimes it isn't. Memory is complicated. Khadija looked back at the old man. He doesn't remember who he is, does he? The doctor shook his head. It's too early to tell. He's been through severe trauma. His mind may need time to recover. If it does at all. Khadija's chest tightened slightly. So he could wake up and not know anything. Yes. The word settled heavily in the room. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the doctor looked at Khadija again. You should rest, he said gently. You've done more than enough. Khadija shook her head immediately. I'm fine. He gave her a knowing look. You're exhausted. I'll rest later, she replied quietly. The doctor didn't argue. Instead, he nodded once. If he wakes again, call me. I will. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. You did something rare tonight. Khadija, he said without looking back. Khadija frowned slightly. What do you mean? He glanced over his shoulder. You chose someone else's life. Over your own comfort. Khadija looked down at her hands. It wasn't a choice, she said softly. It just felt like the right thing. The doctor studied her for a moment. Then he smiled faintly. Those are the hardest choices, he said. And then he was gone. The room fell quiet again. Khadija sat back down slowly, her gaze returning to the old man. Aid, she whispered once more. She didn't know it. She couldn't. But miles away across the city, a man named Obinna Adeyemi was chasing that same name, searching for it, hoping for it. And here. In this small hospital room, that name had just been spoken for the first time in years. Faint, broken, but real. Khadija adjusted the thin blanket over the old man's chest, her movements gentle. Whoever you are, she murmured, you're not alone anymore. Outside, the night deepened. Inside, something had begun. A connection, a thread, invisible, but unbreakable. And slowly, piece by piece, the truth was finding its way back. Morning arrived without kindness. It came harsh and loud, like everything else in Lagos generators, roaring back to life, horns cutting through the air, voices rising in impatient rhythm. But inside the small hospital ward, the world felt slower, quieter, fragile. Khadija had not slept. Her head had tilted once or twice during the night, her eyes closing for a few seconds at a time, but every slight change in the machines pulled her back awake. Fear had become stronger than exhaustion. She leaned forward again, watching the old man's chest rise and fall. Still breathing. Still here. A soft knock came at the door, followed by Nurse Zainab stepping inside. Her expression was less cold than before, but still guarded. "You stayed all night?" she asked. Khadija nodded faintly. "Yes." Zainab glanced at the patient, then back at Khadija. "You should go home," she said. "Clean up. Eat something." Khadija hesitated. "I don't want to leave him." "He's stable for now," Zainab replied. "And you look like you might collapse next." Khadija almost smiled at that, but it faded quickly. "I'll be fine," she said. Zainab studied her for a moment, then sighed softly. "You people," she muttered under her breath. "Always carrying burdens that aren't yours." Khadija didn't answer, because to her, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like responsibility, even if she didn't understand why. Zainab checked the monitors briefly, before turning to leave. "If anything changes, call," she said. Khadija nodded. The door closed again. Silence returned. But this time, it didn't last long. A sudden thought struck Khadija like a sharp pull. "Mama." Her breath caught. She hadn't gone home, hadn't sent word, hadn't even tried. Panic crept in slowly. What if something had happened? What if her mother had needed her? Khadija stood abruptly, her legs slightly unsteady. "I'll be back," she whispered to the old man. Though he couldn't hear her, she stepped out into the corridor, her heart beating faster now. The hospital suddenly felt too far from everything that mattered. She hurried outside, the bright sunlight hitting her eyes sharply after the long night. The city was already alive. Too loud, too fast. Khadija began to walk quickly, then faster, her feet moving almost on their own as anxiety pushed her forward. Each step felt heavier than the last. "What if I'm too late?" The thought echoed painfully in her mind. By the time she reached their small room, her breath was uneven. She pushed the door open quickly. Mama Hawa was sitting upright on the mattress, waiting. Khadija froze. Relief flooded through her so suddenly that her knees almost gave out. "You're here," Hawa said softly, her voice tired but steady. Khadija rushed forward immediately. I'm so sorry, Mama. I didn't mean to stay away, She stopped, because Hawa was looking at her, not with anger, but with quiet concern. "What happened?" her mother asked gently. Khadija hesitated. Then slowly, she sat down beside her. "There was a man," she began. "An old man. He was lying on the road, dying." Hawa listened without interrupting. Khadija told her everything. The people who walked away, the struggle to get help, the money she had spent, the hospital, the night, all of it. When she finished, the room fell silent. Khadija lowered her eyes. "I used everything," she said quietly. "I couldn't buy your medicine." For a moment, she couldn't look up. She expected disappointment, regret, maybe even anger. But instead, she felt a hand gently rest on her shoulder. Khadija looked up slowly. Hawa was smiling, weak, but proud. "You did what was right," her mother said. Khadija blinked. "But your medicine can wait," Hawa interrupted softly. Khadija's eyes filled instantly. "No. It can't," she whispered. "You've been getting worse." Hawa shook her head slightly. "My daughter," she said, her voice calm, "a life was in your hands, and you chose to save it." Khadija's throat tightened. "Not everyone would have done that," Hawa continued, "but you did." A tear slipped down Khadija's cheek. "I didn't think," she admitted. I just couldn't leave him. Hawa nodded. That is who you are. Those simple words settled deep inside Khadija. Not praise, not pressure, just truth. For a moment they sat there in silence. Then reality returned. The emptiness of the room, the lack of food, the absence of money. What are we going to do now? Khadija asked quietly. Hawa exhaled slowly. We will find a way, she said. But this time, her voice carried uncertainty. Khadija felt it, and it scared her. I'll go back to work, Khadija said quickly. I'll talk to Madame Bisi. Maybe she'll understand. Hawa didn't respond immediately. Then she said gently, You missed your shift yesterday. Khadija's heart sank. I know, but maybe if I explain you can try, Hawa said. Khadija stood up again, determination pushing through her fear. I'll fix this, she said. I promise. Hawa watched her quietly. Khadija? She turned back. Yes, Mama. Her mother's gaze softened. Whatever happens, don't lose that heart of yours. Khadija nodded. I won't. But even as she said it, something inside her wondered, how much could a heart carry? Before it broke, she left the room quickly, heading back toward the market where Madame Bisi's stall stood. The closer she got, the tighter her chest became. People moved around her as usual. Life unchanged, unaware, unforgiving. When she finally reached the stall, Madame Bisi was already there, serving customers. Khadija stepped forward cautiously. Ma? Madame Bisi turned. Her expression hardened instantly. You. Khadija swallowed. I'm sorry I didn't come yesterday. There was an emergency. I don't want to hear it, Madame Bisi snapped. Khadija's heart dropped. Please. Ma, just let me explain. I said I don't want to hear it, Madame Bisi repeated sharply. You think this is a place you can come and go as you like? No, Ma, You left your work, Madame Bisi continued, her voice rising. Customers were waiting. Who do you think suffered? Khadija lowered her head. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring back lost business, Madame Bisi said coldly. Khadija's voice softened. I need this job. Madame Bisi looked at her for a long moment, then shook her head. No, she said. The word hit harder than any shout. Ma, please, I can't trust you, Madame Bisi continued, and I don't keep workers I can't trust. Khadija felt her throat tighten painfully. I'll work harder, she said quickly. I won't miss another day, it's too late. Silence fell between them. Final, heavy, unchangeable. Khadija stood there frozen. The world seemed to tilt slightly beneath her feet. Go, Madame Bisi said, already turning back to her customers. Khadija didn't move at first. Then slowly, she stepped back. One step, then another. The noise of the market blurred around her. Her hands felt empty, because they were. No job, no money, no food, and still a man lay in a hospital bed. Alive because of her. Khadija closed her eyes briefly. Was it worth it? The question flickered, then faded, because deep down she already knew the answer. Yes. But knowing that didn't make the consequences any easier. She turned and walked away, her steps slower now, heavier, uncertain, back toward the hospital, back toward the man she had saved, back toward a future she could no longer see clearly. And somewhere within that uncertainty, her sacrifice was only just beginning to unfold. By midday, the city had swallowed Khadija again. Heat rose from the asphalt in wavering lines, and the air felt thick enough to hold. She moved through it like someone carrying an invisible weight because she was. No job, no money, a sick mother at home, and a stranger in a hospital bed whose life now seemed tied somehow to hers. Khadija kept walking, back to the hospital, because even when everything else had fallen apart, that was the one place where something still mattered. Inside, the atmosphere had changed, subtly, but noticeably. Television screens in the waiting area were on. People who normally ignored them were now watching. Nurses paused longer than usual. Conversations dropped into hushed tones. Khadija slowed. A large screen mounted high on the wall flickered with a news broadcast. Breaking story this afternoon, the anchor was saying. Billionaire CEO Obinna Adeyemi has officially launched a nationwide search for his missing father, believed to have disappeared several years ago. Khadija stopped completely. Her eyes lifted to the screen. A photograph appeared. An older man, well-dressed, strong posture. A face marked by dignity and authority. This is Pa Adeyemi, the anchor continued. Any information leading to his whereabouts will be rewarded significantly. The image lingered. Clear, sharp, important. Khadija stared. Something stirred in her mind. A faint, uncomfortable familiarity. But it slipped away before she could hold on to it. That reward is no small thing, someone nearby muttered. Enough to change a life, another replied. Khadija tore her gaze away. It didn't matter. That was another world. A world of wealth, influence, and power. Not hers. She turned and walked toward the ward. But as she moved through the corridor, she began to notice something else. People were looking at her. Not the usual dismissive glances, something different, curious, suspicious, unsettling. She reached the room and pushed the door open. The old man was still there, still breathing, still quiet. Khadija let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. I'm back, she whispered softly, stepping closer. She sat down again, her body instinctively relaxing near him. For a few minutes, everything felt almost normal again. Just her and him, and the quiet fight for recovery. Then the door opened. Nurse Zainab stepped in, followed by another nurse Khadija hadn't seen before. They both looked at Khadija, directly, without hiding it. You came back, Zainab said. Khadija nodded slowly. Yes. Zainab folded her arms slightly. After seeing the news, Khadija frowned. What news? The other nurse exchanged a glance with Zainab. Don't pretend she said everyone has seen it. Khadija's confusion deepened. I don't understand. Zainab stepped closer, her gaze sharp now. The man on that bed, she said, gesturing slightly. You brought him here? Yes. And you expect us to believe that's just a coincidence? Khadija blinked. A coincidence? Zainab's voice lowered slightly. You saw the broadcast. You saw the reward. And suddenly you appear with a man who could match that description. Khadija felt something twist painfully in her chest. No, she said immediately. That's not what happened. Then explain it, the other nurse said, her tone skeptical. Khadija shook her head, struggling to find words. I found him on the road. He was dying. I didn't even know who he was. Zainab watched her closely. Not even when he said that name, Khadija froze. Her heartbeat quickened. You heard that? She asked quietly. We hear everything in this hospital, Zainab replied. Khadija swallowed. He just said, aid. I don't know what it means. The room fell silent for a moment. Then the other nurse scoffed softly. That's very convenient. Khadija's hands tightened slightly. I'm telling the truth. Zainab didn't respond immediately. Her eyes moved from Khadija to the old man, and back again. Truth, she said slowly, is often shaped by what people want to gain. Khadija felt the words hit deeper than she expected. You think I'm lying? She asked, her voice quieter now. Zainab didn't answer directly. I think she said that people are capable of doing anything when there's money involved. Khadija stood up slowly. Her exhaustion, her fear, her loss, all of it suddenly felt sharper. I spent everything I had to save him, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Everything. Neither nurse spoke. Khadija took a step forward. If I wanted money, I wouldn't have done that. Her words hung in the air, raw, honest, unprotected. Zainab's expression shifted, just slightly. But it wasn't enough. Intentions are not always clear, she said finally. Khadija felt something inside her crack. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just quietly, The kind of crack that comes from being misunderstood, from being judged when you have nothing left to defend yourself with. "I don't need you to believe me," she said softly. She turned back to the old man, adjusting the blanket gently. "I just need him to live." Silence followed, heavy, uncomfortable. Then the other nurse spoke again. "Well, you won't be staying here much longer." Khadija looked up. "What do you mean?" Zainab's voice was firm now. "Until his identity is confirmed, access to this room will be restricted." Khadija's heart skipped. "Restricted. You've been here too long already," Zainab added. "And now that there's a possible connection, we can't take risks." Khadija stepped closer instinctively. "I'm not a risk. That is not for you to decide." The words landed cold. Final. Khadija's chest tightened. "You're asking me to leave him," she said. "For now," Zainab replied. Khadija shook her head immediately. "No." Both nurses stiffened slightly. "You don't have a choice," the other nurse has said. Khadija's voice dropped, but it didn't weaken. "I stayed when no one else would," she said. "I helped when no one cared." Zainab's eyes hardened. "And now this is a medical and legal situation, not a personal one." Khadija looked at the old man again. His face was calm, unaware, unprotected, just like before. Something inside her refused to accept it. "I'm not leaving," she said. The room went still. Zainab stepped forward slightly. "You're making this difficult." Khadija met her gaze. "No," she said quietly. "I'm doing what's right." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then a voice cut through the tension from the doorway. "What's going on here?" Everyone turned. Dr. Ifunanya stood there, his expression serious as he took in the scene. Zainab straightened slightly. "She's refusing to leave," she said. The doctor's eyes moved to Khadija, then to the patient, then back again. "Is that true?" he asked. Khadija didn't hesitate. "Yes." A brief silence followed. Then the doctor stepped into the room, and everything shifted again. The room held its breath. Dr. Ifunanya stepped in fully, the door closing softly behind him. His gaze moved from Nurse Zainab to the other nurse, then finally settled on Khadija. There was no anger in his eyes, but there was weight, the kind that came from decisions no one else wanted to carry. "Explain," he said quietly. Zainab spoke first. "There's a national alert, doctor, the CEO's father. The resemblance, the name he uttered. We can't ignore it. We need to control access until we verify who he is." "And you think Khadija is a threat?" the doctor asked. Zainab hesitated. "I think the situation has changed." Khadija felt the words like a wall closing in. "I'm not here for money," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I didn't even know about the broadcast until I saw it in the lobby." The other nurse folded her arms. "That's what anyone would say." Khadija didn't look at her. She looked at the man on the bed. "I stayed when he was nothing to anyone," she said softly. "I'm not leaving now that he might be something." The doctor watched her for a long moment. Then he turned to Zainab. "What do the policies actually say?" Zainab exhaled. "In cases with potential legal implications or high-profile identity, we restrict access to immediate medical staff until verification. It protects the patient. And who protects the patient from loneliness?" the doctor asked. No one answered. The machines continued their steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Dr. Ifunanya walked closer to the bed, checking the monitors with practiced ease. The old man's vitals were stable, but fragile like a balance that could tip with the slightest push. "He responds to her," the doctor said quietly, not looking at anyone in particular. "We've seen that." Zainab nodded reluctantly. "Yes." Then removing her completely could do more harm than good. The other nurse opened her mouth to object, but the doctor raised a hand. "I didn't say there should be no restriction," he added. "I said we should be careful." He turned back to Khadija. "You'll have to step out for now," he said gently. The words landed, but not as sharply as she had feared. Khadija nodded slowly. "For how long?" "Until we run a few checks," he replied, "and until we receive guidance from administration. It won't be long." Khadija swallowed. "I'll wait," she said. The doctor gave a small nod. "Thank you." Zainab stepped aside, signaling the door. Khadija took one last look at the old man. "I'll be right outside," she whispered. Then she turned and walked out. The corridor felt colder, longer, empty in a way that pressed against her chest. She sat on a metal bench opposite the ward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. People passed by, patients, nurses, relatives, but none of them saw her. Or maybe they did. Maybe they just didn't care. Minutes stretched, then an hour. Khadija watched the clock on the wall, each tick louder than the last. Her thoughts circled endlessly. Mama at home? No money, no food. And now, even this small place she had carved out beside a stranger was being taken from her. Khadija? She looked up. Nurse Zainab stood in front of her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Zainab sat down beside her. "You haven't eaten," she said. Khadija gave a faint shake of her head. "I'm not hungry. That's not true." Khadija didn't argue. Zainab reached into her pocket and pulled out a small wrapped piece of bread. "Take it," she said. Khadija blinked, surprised. "I take it?" Zainab repeated softer this time. Khadija accepted slowly. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a few seconds. Then Zainab spoke again. "You have to understand something," she said. "This isn't about you." Khadija looked at her. "It feels like it is." Zainab nodded slightly. "I know, but when powerful people are involved, everything becomes complicated." Khadija lowered her gaze. "I didn't ask for any of this." "I believe you," Zainab said quietly. Khadija looked up, startled. "You do." Zainab hesitated, then sighed. "You don't look like someone who plans for reward," she admitted. "You look like someone who acts before thinking about the cost." Khadija gave a small, tired smile. "That's not always a good thing," no, Zainab said, "but it's rare." Another silence settled between them, less tense this time. Then footsteps approached quickly down the corridor. Firm, purposeful, different. Khadija felt it before she saw it. Something had changed. People began to move aside instinctively. Heads turned. Whispers started. "Is that him?" "It must be. He came himself." Khadija stood slowly, her heart beginning to beat faster without knowing why. A group of security men entered the corridor, first scanning the area. Behind them, a tall man in a perfectly tailored suit walked forward. His presence was undeniable, controlled, powerful, every step precise, every movement watched. Khadija's breath caught slightly. She had seen men like him only from a distance, on screens, in stories. Never this close, never this real. Obinna Adeyemi stopped just outside the ward. His eyes were sharp-focused, scanning everything in seconds. "Where is he?" he asked. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. Zainab stood immediately. "Inside, sir." Obinna nodded once. Then his gaze shifted. It landed on Khadija, just for a moment. But in that moment, something paused. Khadija felt it. The way his eyes studied her. Not dismissively, not casually, but as if trying to understand something. Then the moment passed. He turned back to the door. "Clear the room," he said. Staff moved quickly, efficiently. Within seconds, the space inside the ward was emptied, except for the doctor and Obinna. Khadija stood frozen outside. Her fingers tightened around the piece of bread still in her hand. This was him. The man from the broadcast. The son. The one searching. The one who didn't know. Her chest rose and fell slowly. She took a step forward instinctively, but one of the security men blocked her path. "No entry," he said. Khadija stopped. No entry." The words were firm, final. Khadija stepped back slowly. Her eyes moved to the door. Closed. Separating her from everything she had fought for. Inside that room, a truth was waiting to be uncovered. And for the first time since she found the old man, Khadija felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. Fear, not of losing him, but of what would happen if he was found. The corridor fell into a tense, watchful silence after the door closed behind Obinna Adeyemi. Khadija remained standing where she was, her eyes fixed on the ward, as if she could see through the walls. Around her, the hospital moved in hushed patterns, nurses walking faster than usual, security men exchanging low words, a receptionist answering calls with a more careful tone. Everything had changed, not because the old man was different, but because someone powerful had arrived. Khadija slowly sat back down on the bench, her hands resting loosely in her lap. The piece of bread Zainab had given her was still there, untouched. She didn't feel hungry anymore. Hunger had been replaced by something else. Uncertainty. Inside the ward, voices were muffled. Khadija strained to hear, but the thick door allowed nothing through. Minutes passed. Then more. Each second stretched into something longer than time itself. "What do you think will happen when?" Khadija asked quietly. Zainab, who was still standing nearby, glanced at her. "If it's really him," she said slowly, "then everything changes." Khadija nodded faintly, yes. But she wasn't sure what everything meant. For the old man, for the CEO, for her. Inside the room, Obinna stood at the foot of the bed, his eyes locked on the man lying there. The machines hummed steadily, the oxygen mask fogged faintly with each breath. Alive, but fragile. Dr. Ifunanya stood beside him, speaking calmly. "We stabilized him last night," he explained. "Severe dehydration trauma, signs of prolonged neglect. He's lucky he was brought in when he was." Obinna didn't respond immediately. He stepped closer, each movement slower now, more deliberate, as if he were approaching something sacred or dangerous. "Has he spoken?" Obinna asked. Briefly, the doctor replied. A single word. Aid. Obinna's chest tightened, his jaw flexed slightly. "Aid," he repeated under his breath. The name echoed in a way that felt too familiar. Too close. "Memory is unclear," the doctor continued. "He may be suffering from partial amnesia." Obinna nodded once. His eyes remained fixed on the man's face. The beard was longer, the skin more worn, the body thinner. But something beneath all of that, pulled at him. He reached out slowly, then stopped. His hand hovered just above the old man's arm. For a moment, he couldn't bring himself to touch him, because touching him would make it real. And if it wasn't him, if it wasn't his father, then this fragile hope would shatter all over again, so the doctor prompted gently. Obinna exhaled slowly. Then finally he placed his hand on the old man's arm. The contact was light, almost hesitant. Warmth met warmth, skin to skin. And something shifted. The old man's fingers twitched slightly, barely noticeable. But enough. Obinna froze. "Did you see that?" he asked. The doctor nodded. "Yes." Obinna leaned closer. "Father," he said quietly. The word felt unfamiliar on his lips, unused, heavy with years of absence. No response. The old man's breathing remained steady, his eyes closed, still. Obinna swallowed. "Can he hear me?" he asked. "It's possible," the doctor said. "We've seen responses to voice." Obinna nodded slowly. Then he spoke again, softly this time, as if afraid to break something fragile. "Baba, it's me." Silence. The machines continued their rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Outside, Khadija sat forward slightly. Her heart beat faster. She didn't know what was happening inside, but she felt it. Something was unfolding, something important. Zainab crossed her arms, watching the door. "They're taking too long," she murmured. Khadija didn't respond. She couldn't. Her focus was locked on that closed door. Inside, Obinna remained beside the bed, waiting, watching, hoping. Minutes passed. Then, the old man's brow shifted slightly. A faint crease, a sign. Obina leaned closer immediately. "Can you hear me?" he asked. A pause. Then a breath, deeper than before. The old man's lips parted slightly. A sound formed, weak, broken. But there. "Obi." Obina's world stopped. The room seemed to shrink around him, and "Obi?" It came again, faint, but unmistakable. Only one person had ever called him that. Only one. Obina's hand tightened instinctively around the old man's arm. "It's me," he said quickly, his voice unsteady now. "I'm here." The old man's eyes fluttered, slowly, struggling, then opened. Just enough. Their gazes met, and in that moment time collapsed. Years disappeared. Distance vanished. Pain returned. Recognition flickered. Not fully, not clearly, but enough. "Obi," the old man whispered again. Obina's breath caught in his throat. "It's me," he repeated, his voice breaking now, despite himself. "It's your son." A tear slipped down his cheek before he could stop it. He didn't wipe it away. He didn't care. The old man's eyes lingered on him for a second longer. Then, they closed again. His body relaxed. The connection, gone, but not lost. Not completely. Obina stood there frozen, his hand still resting on the arm of the man he had searched for years. "Sir," the doctor said quietly. That was a response. Obina nodded slowly. But words didn't come. Because what had just happened was more than confirmation. It was something deeper, more painful, more real. His father was alive, but barely. And everything he had imagined about their reunion, all the words, all the questions, all the answers had been reduced to a single broken word. Obi. Outside, the door opened. Khadija stood up instantly. Obina stepped out first. His expression had changed. Not the controlled, distant calm from before. Something softer now. Something shaken. Their eyes met again. Longer this time. And for reasons neither of them could explain, neither looked away immediately. Zainab stepped forward. "Sir," she asked. Obina didn't answer her. He looked at Khadija. "You brought him here," he said. It wasn't a question. Khadija nodded slowly. "Yes." A brief silence followed. Then Obina spoke again. "Stay." The word surprised everyone, even himself. Zainab blinked. "Sir, hospital protocol, I said she stays," Obina repeated, his voice firm now. No one argued. Khadija stood there, unsure what to say, unsure what this meant. But for the first time since being pushed out, the door behind him remained open. And she was no longer on the outside. For now, she was part of what came next. The word "stay" still echoed in Khadija's mind long after it was spoken. For a moment she didn't move, didn't breathe, because nothing about this felt real. The guard stepped aside. The nurses said nothing. Even the air seemed to shift, like an invisible line had been erased. Khadija looked at Obina, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "You mean, I can go in?" she asked softly. Obina held her gaze for a brief second, then nodded once. Yes. No explanation, no hesitation. Just a decision. Khadija swallowed her chest, tightening with something she couldn't fully name. Gratitude, confusion, fear, all tangled together. She stepped forward slowly, passing through the doorway, as if crossing into another world. Inside, the room felt different now. Not because of the machines, not because of the man on the bed, but because of the presence of the son standing beside him. Obina had moved closer again, his posture straight, but no longer distant. There was something in the way he stood, protective, but uncertain. Khadija stopped a few steps away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They were strangers, bound together by a man who lay between them. Khadija looked at the old man. His breathing was steady, his face calm. But knowing what she knew now, he no longer felt like just a stranger. He was someone's father, someone's missing piece, someone who mattered deeply to someone else. Khadijah's throat tightened. "I didn't know who he was," she said quietly. Obina turned slightly toward her. "I know," he replied. The simplicity of his answer surprised her. "You believe me?" she asked. Obina's expression didn't change much, but his voice softened just enough. "You spent everything you had to save him," he said. "People who chase money don't do that." Khadijah lowered her eyes slightly. "It wasn't about money," she said. "I can see that." Silence settled again, but it was different now. Less tense, more aware. Obina glanced at the chair beside the bed. "You stayed with him all night?" Khadijah nodded. "Yes." "Why?" The question was simple, but not easy. Khadijah thought for a moment, then answered honestly, because no one else would. The words hung in the air, unpolished, unprotected, true. Obina looked at her more closely now, not as a stranger, not as a risk, but as someone he needed to understand. "And you didn't think about what it would cost you?" he asked. Khadijah gave a small, tired smile. "I did," she admitted. "I just chose not to let it stop me." Obina exhaled slowly. He turned back to his father. For years he had searched with resources, influence, power. And yet the person who found him was someone who had nothing. The contrast was not lost on him. "Khadijah," he said. She looked up. "Thank you." The words were quiet, but they carried weight. Khadijah blinked slightly. "You don't have to thank me," she said. "I do," Obina replied, "because I wasn't there." The honesty in his voice surprised even him. Khadijah didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. The machines continued their steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Dr. Ifunanya stepped back into the room, clipboard in hand. "I've arranged for further tests," he said. "We'll need to confirm identity formally, but—" He glanced at Obina. "The response we saw, it's significant." Obina nodded. "I know." The doctor turned to Khadijah. "You should rest," he said gently. "You've done more than enough." Khadijah shook her head. "I'm fine." Obina looked at her again. "You're not," he said. Khadijah hesitated. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel it, the exhaustion, the hunger, the weight of everything she had been carrying. "I just need a little time," she said. Obina studied her for a moment. Then he turned to one of the security men outside. "Arrange something for her," he said. Khadijah's head snapped up. "No," she said quickly. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to," Obina interrupted calmly. "I'm choosing to." Khadijah felt her chest tighten. "I didn't do this for anything in return," she said. "I know," he replied. "Then please, don't make it feel like a transaction." The room went quiet. Even the doctor paused. Obina looked at her. Really looked this time. And for a brief moment he saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Someone who wasn't asking. Someone who wasn't calculating. Someone who simply gave. He nodded slowly. "All right," he said. Khadijah exhaled softly. "Thank you." The tension eased slightly. Then Dr. Ifunanya cleared his throat. "There's something else," he said. Both Khadijah and Obina turned toward him. "The hospital administration has been informed," he continued. "Given the circumstances, there will be attention." Obina's expression hardened slightly. "I expected that." "There may also be questions," the doctor added, "about how he was found, about who brought him in." Khadijah felt a flicker of unease. "What kind of questions?" she asked. The doctor hesitated. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "when money and power are involved, people look for angles." Khadijah understood immediately. Suspicion, doubt, accusations. The same things she had already begun to feel. Obina noticed the shift in her expression. "No one is going to accuse you of anything," he said firmly. Khadijah didn't respond right away, because she had lived long enough to know that wasn't always how the world worked. Obina stepped closer. "I won't let that happen," he added. This time, Khadija looked at him. There was certainty in his voice, not just confidence, promise, and for some reason, she believed him. A soft sound drew their attention back to the bed. The old man's fingers moved again. Khadija stepped closer instinctively. "Sir," she said gently. Obina moved to the other side, both of them now standing beside him, waiting, watching. The old man's lips parted slightly. A breath, a whisper, "Water." Khadija reacted immediately, reaching for the cup on the table. "Here," she said softly, helping lift his head slightly. Obina watched as she supported him with care. Gentle, patient, unfamiliar to him, but deeply human. The old man swallowed weakly, then settled again. His eyes remained closed, but his breathing was steady, alive, still fighting. Khadija placed the cup back down. Her hands trembled slightly now, not from fear, but from relief. Obina looked at her, then at his father, then back at her. And in that quiet moment, something unspoken formed. Not a bond, not yet, but a beginning, because without Khadija, this moment would not exist. And both of them knew it, even if they didn't say it. Outside, the world was beginning to take notice. Inside, something more important was happening. A life had been saved. A family had begun to reconnect. And a girl who had nothing was slowly becoming part of a story far bigger than she had ever imagined. By late afternoon, the hospital no longer felt like a quiet place of healing. It felt like the center of a storm. News had spread faster than anyone expected. A few whispers between staff had turned into phone calls, and phone calls had turned into messages. By the time the sun began to lower over Lagos, reporters had already started gathering outside the hospital gates. Cameras, microphones, questions. Too many questions. Inside, the administration office buzzed with urgency. "This cannot leak any further," one senior official said sharply. "We need confirmation before making any statements." "But the media already knows he's here," another replied. "They're asking if it's Pa Adeyemi. Then we say nothing until we are sure." In the middle of it all, Obina stood still, silent, listening, but not really hearing, because his focus remained on one thing: the man lying in that hospital bed. His father, or at least, the man who might be, Sir Chidinma said, quietly stepping closer. "We should prepare for a public response." Obina didn't look at her. "Not yet. But the pressure," I said, "not yet," he repeated more firmly. The room fell silent. Chidinma nodded. "Yes, sir." Obina finally turned. "Where are the test results?" "They're being processed," she replied. "DNA confirmation will take time, but initial markers—" "I don't need time," Obina said. "I need certainty." Chidinma hesitated. "Sir, we may already have it." Obina's eyes sharpened slightly. "What do you mean the medical team found an old surgical scar?" she said. "Left side of the abdomen. It matches the records from your father's past operation." Obina felt his breath catch slightly. A scar. A detail no stranger could fake. "Show me," he said. Moments later, they were back in the ward. Khadija stood quietly near the window, her arms folded loosely as she watched the city below. She turned as they entered her eyes, immediately going to the old man. "He woke again?" she asked softly. "Not fully," Dr. Ifunanya replied, "but there are signs." Obina stepped closer to the bed. "Show me the scar," he said. The doctor nodded gently, lifting part of the blanket and adjusting the patient's gown. There, faint but visible, a long-healed scar ran across the left side of the man's abdomen. Obina stared at it. His chest tightened. He remembered it. He had been there, years ago. A hospital room. A younger version of himself sitting beside his father, waiting, praying. And that scar had been the mark of survival. "Baba," he whispered under his breath. There was no doubt now. No more questions. No more searching. He had found him. After all these years. Khadija watched from a distance, her heart pounding quietly. She didn't need confirmation. She could see it in Obina's face. The shift, the certainty, the emotion he could no longer hide. "It's him," Obinna said finally. The words landed heavily in the room. Final. Unquestionable. Dr. Ifunanya nodded. We'll still complete the tests, he said, but yes, everything points to that. Obinna didn't respond. He couldn't, because the reality was settling in fully now. His father, the man he had searched for, had been lying on the streets, alone, unseen, until someone like Khadija had found him. His gaze shifted slowly toward her. Khadija stood still, unsure of what to do. This wasn't her moment. It wasn't her story. But somehow, she was part of it. Obinna walked toward her, each step deliberate, measured, until he stood just a few feet away. For a moment, neither spoke. Then you saved him, he said. Khadija shook her head slightly. I helped, she replied. No, Obinna said quietly. You saved him. His voice carried no doubt, only truth. Khadija looked down briefly. I didn't know who he was. That doesn't matter. Khadija met his eyes again. It matters to everyone else, she said softly. Obinna understood what she meant. The whispers, the suspicion, the assumptions. He had seen it too, and he didn't like it. It shouldn't, he said. Khadija gave a small, tired smile. But it does. A silence followed, not uncomfortable, but real. Then Obinna spoke again. What do you need? He asked. Khadija frowned slightly. I don't understand. Your mother, he said. Your situation. Tell me what you need. Khadija hesitated. This was the moment many people waited for. The moment to ask, to gain, to change everything. But something inside her resisted. I didn't do this for anything, she said again. I know, Obinna replied. That's why I'm asking. Khadija looked at him carefully. Then she answered honestly. I need my mother to get better, she said. And I need to work, that's all. Obinna nodded slowly. Simple. Clear. No greed. No demand. Just survival. I'll take care of it, he said. Khadija opened her mouth to protest, but stopped. Because she saw something in his expression. Not charity, not obligation, but gratitude. And something else. Respect. For the first time in a long time, Khadija didn't feel small. She didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. A sudden noise outside the room broke the moment. Voices, raised, urgent. What's happening? Khadija asked. Chidinma stepped toward the door, listening. The press, she said. They're trying to get inside. Obinna's expression hardened instantly. Not here, he said. Not now. He turned to the security team. Clear the corridor. No one comes near this room without my permission. Yes, sir. They moved immediately. Efficient, controlled. Khadija watched it all unfold. The power, the authority. The difference between his world and hers. It was overwhelming, but also distant. Because despite everything, the man on that bed was the same. Fragile, human, dependent on care. Not status, not wealth, just care. Khadija stepped closer again, her eyes softening as she looked at him. He asked for water earlier, she said quietly. Obinna nodded. I heard. Khadija adjusted the blanket gently. He responds when someone talks to him, she added, even if he doesn't fully wake. Obinna watched her. The way she moved, the way she spoke. There was no hesitation, no performance, just kindness. Pure and simple. Stay with him, he said. Khadija looked up. I will. And she meant it. Outside, the world was growing louder. Inside, something else was growing. A truth, a connection, a turning point. Because now everything was known, and nothing would ever be the same again. By evening, the hospital had become a fortress. Security lined the corridors. The main entrance was partially blocked. Outside, the press continued to gather voices, rising cameras, flashing questions, piling on top of each other with no answers to settle them. Inside the ward, however, everything remained quiet. Almost unnaturally so. Khadija stood near the bed, her attention fixed on the old man Pa Adeyemi, Now not just a nameless stranger. The name had changed something in the room. It carried weight history importance. But to Khadija, he was still the same man she had found on the roadside. Fragile, unprotected, human. She dipped a small cloth into a bowl of warm water and gently wiped his forehead. The movement was slow, careful, almost instinctive. "Easy," she whispered, though he was not fully awake. Behind her, Obina stood watching. He had been there for hours now, not leaving, not stepping away. For years he had imagined this moment, finding his father, bringing him home. But nothing about this felt like what he had imagined. There were no answers, no explanations, only questions, and a quiet guilt that had begun to settle deep in his chest. How had it come to this? How had a man like Pa Adeyemi ended up on the streets? Where had he been all these years? Why hadn't he come back? And perhaps the question that hurt the most, why hadn't Obina found him sooner? Khadija finished wiping his forehead and adjusted the cloth beneath his head. She noticed Obina's gaze and stepped back slightly. "He's resting," she said softly. Obina nodded. "You've been doing that for hours," he said. Khadija shrugged lightly. "It helps." "With what?" She thought for a moment. Everything she replied. Obina didn't respond immediately. He understood more than she realized, because for the first time in a long time he felt powerless. All the money in the world, all the influence, and yet he could not force his father to wake, could not demand answers, could not undo the years that had passed. Khadija, however, she did something else. She stayed, without expectation, without control, just presence. Khadija Obina said. She looked at him. "Yes, if he hadn't woken when you were here." He paused, slightly choosing his words. "Would you have still stayed?" Khadija didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Why?" She looked at Pa Adeyemi again before answering. "Because even if someone can't respond, they can still feel when they're not alone." Obina felt the words settle deeper than he expected. Not alone. His father had been alone for years, and he hadn't known. The thought tightened something inside him. A soft sound broke the silence. Khadija turned immediately. Pa Adeyemi's fingers moved again, stronger this time, more deliberate. "Sir," she said gently, stepping closer. Obina moved to the other side of the bed. "Baba." The old man's breathing shifted. His chest rose more fully. His brow furrowed slightly, as if something inside him was pushing upward, trying to break through. Then his eyes opened. Slowly. This time they didn't close again immediately. They stayed open, searching, confused, alive. Khadija's heart jumped. "You're okay," she said softly. "You're safe." Pa Adeyemi's gaze moved weakly across the room. It landed on Khadija first. His eyes lingered there, as if recognizing something, not memory, but feeling. Then his gaze shifted, to Obina, and everything changed. He stared, longer this time, deeper. His lips trembled slightly. "Obi." The word came clearer now, stronger. Obina felt his breath catch. "I'm here," he said quickly, stepping closer. "I'm here, Baba." Pa Adeyemi's eyes filled faintly with something unspoken. Pain, relief, confusion all at once. "Where?" he whispered weakly. "You're in the hospital," Khadija said gently. "You're safe." His gaze flickered between them, then settled again on Obina. "You grew," he murmured. Obina let out a small, broken laugh. "Yes," he said. "It's been a long time." A faint smile touched the old man's lips, but it didn't last. His expression shifted. Something darker passed through his eyes. "Fear." "Where have you been?" Obina asked quietly. The question hung in the air, heavy, important. Pa Adeyemi's breathing became uneven. His fingers tightened slightly against the sheet. He started, then stopped. His eyes closed briefly, as if the effort of remembering was too much. "Don't push him," Dr. Ifunanya said gently from the doorway. He had returned without anyone noticing. His body is still weak. Obina nodded, stepping back slightly. Khadija remained close. "It's okay," she said softly. "You don't have to speak now." Pa Adeyemi's eyes opened again. They found hers. And in that moment, something settled. Something calm. Something steady. He reached out slightly, his hand trembling. Khadija reacted instantly, taking his hand gently in hers. "I'm here," she said. His grip tightened just a little. Not strong, but enough. Enough to say something. Something important. Something that didn't need words. Obina watched it happen. The connection, the trust, the ease. And for the first time, he understood something clearly. His father had responded to her before him, recognized her before him, held on to her before him. Not because she was family, but because she had been there, when no one else was. The realization didn't hurt. It humbled him. Pa Adeyemi's gaze softened as he looked at Khadija. "You," he whispered. Khadija leaned slightly closer. "Yes, you didn't leave." Her throat tightened. "No," she said softly. "I didn't." His eyes closed again, but this time, not from weakness, from peace, because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't alone. The room fell quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet, not tense, not uncertain, but full, alive. Obina exhaled slowly, stepping back. His eyes moved between Khadija and his father. Then he spoke. From today, he said, his voice calm but firm. No one questions her presence here again. Zainab, who had been standing near the door, nodded immediately. "Yes, sir." Khadija looked at him, surprised. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I do," Obina replied. "Because you earned it." Khadija didn't know how to respond. So she said nothing, because sometimes silence was enough. Outside, the noise continued. Inside, something had shifted permanently. A father had begun to return. A son had begun to understand. And a girl who had nothing had become someone impossible to ignore. The story was no longer about finding. It was about facing. And what came next would test all of them. The night carried a different weight now. Not the quiet uncertainty of before, but a tension that pressed against every wall of the hospital. Outside, the media had doubled. Floodlights illuminated the gates as reporters stood shoulder to shoulder, calling out questions no one inside was ready to answer. Is it confirmed? Is that really Pa Adeyemi? Where has he been all these years? Inside, the administration struggled to hold control. "This is escalating," one senior official said, pacing across the office. "If we don't release a statement, they'll create their own version of the story. And if we release one too soon," another replied, "we risk misinformation." In the middle of it all, Obina had made a decision. "No press statement tonight," he said firmly. "My father's condition comes first." There were murmurs of agreement, but also concern. "Sir, public pressure. I'll handle the public," Obina cut in. "You handle the patient." The conversation ended there, because when Obina Adeyemi decided something, it stayed decided. Back in the ward, the atmosphere was calmer, but beneath that calm, something deeper was building. Khadija sat beside Pa Adeyemi, her hand resting lightly near his. She had not left his side again. Even when the doctors insisted she rest, she stayed close, not out of obligation, but because it felt right. Pa Adeyemi had woken twice more, each time a little stronger, each time more aware, and each time his eyes searched for her. Not first, but always. Khadija, Obina said quietly from across the room. She looked up. "Yes, you should eat something." Khadija shook her head gently. "I'm okay." Obina frowned slightly. "You haven't eaten properly in 2 days." "I've had enough," she replied. He knew that wasn't true, but he didn't push. Not this time. Instead, he stepped closer. "My father asked for you when he woke," he said. Khadija's eyes softened. I heard. He remembers you, Obina added. Khadija hesitated. Not fully, she said. Just pieces. Sometimes pieces are enough, Obina replied. Khadija looked at him for a moment, then back at Pa Adeyemi. Do you remember everything about him? She asked quietly. The question caught Obina off guard. He paused, then shook his head slightly. No, he admitted. Khadija nodded. Memory works like that, she said. It holds what matters most. Obina didn't respond immediately, because the thought unsettled him. What mattered most to his father now, the past, or the person who stayed when he had nothing? A sudden knock broke the moment. Firm. Urgent. Chidinma entered quickly. Sir. She said, her voice low, but tense. You need to see this. Obina took the tablet she handed him. On the screen, a news headline. Bold, clear, scandalous, unknown. Girl accused of staging rescue for CEO's father reward. Khadija felt the air shift instantly. What is it? She asked. Obina didn't answer. He read further. The article continued speculation, accusations, a twisted narrative suggesting that a mysterious young woman had deliberately placed Pa Adeyemi in harm's way to later rescue him and claim the reward. No evidence, just suspicion, just poison. Obina's jaw tightened. This is nonsense, he said. But the damage was already there. Khadija felt it, even before she saw it. The way Chidinma avoided her eyes. The way Zainab shifted slightly near the door. The way the room suddenly felt colder. What does it say? Khadija asked quietly. No one answered. She stepped forward. Show me. Obina hesitated, then handed her the tablet. Khadija read. Slowly. Each word heavier than the last. Her fingers tightened slightly around the device. Her chest rose and fell unevenly. When she finished, she didn't speak. She simply handed it back. Silence followed. Long, painful. They don't know anything, Obina said firmly. This is just media noise. Khadija nodded faintly. Yes, but her voice had changed. Quieter, more distant. They always need a story, she added. Obina stepped closer. Khadija, it's fine, she interrupted gently. But it wasn't. And they both knew it. Zainab spoke carefully. This could spread quickly. It won't matter, Obina said. I'll shut it down. Khadija shook her head. You can't stop people from thinking what they want, she said. Her eyes moved back to Pa Adeyemi. Peaceful. Unaware. I didn't do anything wrong, she continued softly. No one here thinks you did, Obina replied. Khadija looked at him, then around the room, then back at him. That's not the whole world, she said. The truth of it landed heavily. Obina felt something rise inside him. Anger. Not at her. At the situation. At the injustice. At the fact that someone who had done something purely good was now being questioned, doubted, turned into something ugly. I won't let this continue, he said. Khadija gave a small, tired smile. You don't control the world, she said. Obina met her gaze. No, he said. But I control my part in it. A pause. Then, from the bed, a voice. Weak, but clear. Khadija? Everyone turned instantly. Pa Adeyemi's eyes were open, focused, present. Khadija moved to him immediately. I'm here, she said. His gaze moved slowly across the room, then settled. On Obina, then back to Khadija. His fingers tightened slightly. She saved me, he said. The words were quiet, but undeniable. The room froze. She didn't leave, he added. Each word carried effort, but also truth. Pure, unfiltered. Obina stepped closer. Baba, you need to rest. No, Pa Adeyemi said softly. His eyes remained on Khadija. People will talk, he continued, but truth is not noise. Khadija felt her throat tighten. You don't have to say anything, she whispered. I do, he replied, because this was the moment. Not for wealth, not for status, but for truth. Pa Adeyemi looked at Obina. "Make it known," he said. Obina nodded slowly. "I will." Then Pa Adeyemi's eyes closed again, exhausted, but peaceful, because he had spoken. And that was enough. The room remained silent for a long moment. Then Obina turned, his expression no longer conflicted, no longer uncertain, resolved. "Prepare a statement," he said. Chidinma nodded immediately. "Yes, sir." Obina looked at Khadija. "This ends tonight." Khadija didn't respond, but for the first time since reading the article, she felt something shift, not in the world, but in the room, because the truth had just spoken for itself, and this time someone powerful was ready to stand behind it. The night no longer belonged to whispers, it belonged to truth. Outside the hospital, the crowd had grown restless. Cameras pointed toward the gates, reporters speaking rapidly into microphones, each trying to be the first to break the next piece of the story. But inside, something had already been decided. Obina stood in a quiet conference room, facing a row of cameras that had been allowed in under strict control. The chaos outside had been replaced by order here. Lights were steady, microphones aligned, every detail prepared. Chidinma gave a small nod. "We're ready, sir." Obina adjusted his jacket slightly, though the gesture was more habit than necessity. His expression was calm again, but not distant. This time it carried something else. Purpose. "Begin," he said. The cameras went live, across Lagos, across the country, and beyond. "My name is Obina Adeyemi," he began, his voice steady. "And tonight I am not speaking as a CEO." A pause. "But as a son." The room stilled. "Earlier today, my father, Pa Adeyemi, was found and brought to this hospital in critical condition. After years of searching, he is alive." A murmur rippled even through the controlled press. Obina continued, "But there is something more important than how he was found." He said, "It is who found him." He paused again, this time deliberately. To the young woman who is being questioned, accused, and misunderstood, he set his gaze unwavering. "I want to say this clearly." He stepped slightly closer to the microphones. She did not seek a reward. She did not create a story. She did not benefit from this situation. His voice deepened. She saved a life. Silence followed. Heavy. Undeniable. Obina held it for a moment, then continued. "She used everything she had, her time, her strength, her last money to bring my father to safety. When others walked away, she stayed." His words reached beyond the room, beyond the hospital, into every place where doubt had begun to grow. "I owe her more than I can express," he said, "and any attempt to question her integrity is not just wrong, it is unjust." The statement landed like a final verdict, clear, unshakable. "No further speculation will be tolerated," Obina added. "From this moment forward, the truth is known." He stepped back. The cameras remained fixed, but the message had already been delivered. Outside, the reaction was immediate. Voices shifted. Questions changed. The story corrected itself. Inside the ward, Khadija stood still, watching the small television mounted on the wall. She had not expected any of this, not the attention, not the accusations, and certainly not this. Her name had not been spoken, but somehow she felt seen more clearly than ever before. Zainab stood beside her. "He didn't have to do that," she said quietly. Khadija shook her head. "No, he didn't. But he did. And that meant something. Something real." Behind them, Pa Adeyemi rested quietly, his breathing steady, his body slowly recovering. And for the first time in a long time, there was no uncertainty about what came next. The door opened softly. Obina stepped in. The noise of the outside world stayed behind him. He looked at Khadija. For a moment, neither spoke. "Then it's done," he said. Khadija nodded. "Thank you." Obina shook his head slightly. "You don't thank someone for telling the truth." Khadija gave a faint smile. "Not everyone does." A brief silence followed. Then Obina stepped closer. "My father asked for you again," he said. Khadija turned immediately towards the bed. She moved without hesitation, taking her place beside Pa Adeyemi once more. His eyes opened slowly as she approached. "You came back," he whispered. "I never left," she replied gently. A faint smile touched his lips. Obinna watched them, the ease, the connection, the quiet understanding. It was something he couldn't force, something he couldn't buy, something that had simply happened, Khadija, he said. She looked up. "Yes, you and your mother, you won't go back to the way things were." Khadija hesitated. "I didn't do this for that." "I know," Obinna replied. "That's why I'm saying it." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You need stability," he continued. "Your mother needs treatment, and you deserve more than survival." Khadija's eyes softened, but she didn't answer immediately, because part of her still held on to something simple, something grounding. "I don't want to lose who I am," she said quietly. Obinna nodded. "You won't?" "How do you know because someone who could give everything away won't be changed by receiving something back?" The words settled gently, not forcing, not demanding, just offering. Khadija looked at Pa Adeyemi, then back at Obinna. "Then I'll accept help," she said slowly, "but not as a reward." Obinna understood. "As a beginning," he said. Khadija nodded. Yes. Outside the city continued its endless movement, cars, voices, life. But inside that hospital room, something had come full circle. A man who was lost had been found. A son who had searched had finally seen. And a girl who had nothing had given everything. And in doing so, changed everything, not through power, not through wealth, but through something far rarer. Unconditional kindness. The kind that doesn't ask, doesn't wait, doesn't calculate. The kind that simply acts. And sometimes that is enough to rewrite a destiny for everyone. Sometimes the world teaches us to protect what little we have, to hold tightly to every coin, every opportunity, every small piece of security. And in many ways, that instinct is necessary. Life can be hard, and survival often demands caution. But stories like Khadija's remind us of something deeper. That there are moments when doing the right thing will cost you everything, and yet it is still the only choice that allows you to live with yourself afterward. Khadija did not know who Pa Adeyemi was. She did not see wealth status or reward. She saw a human life slipping away. And she chose to act. That choice cost her money, her job, her stability. But it also revealed something powerful. That kindness, when it is real and unconditional, carries a force greater than fear. And in the end, truth has a way of finding its voice. It may be delayed, it may be questioned, it may even be attacked. But when it stands clear and undeniable, it restores balance. It brings justice. It heals. So wherever you are watching from, take a moment to reflect. What would you have done in Khadija's place? Would you have walked away or would you have stayed? If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. And if you believe in stories that remind us of humanity, kindness, and hope, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video, because sometimes the smallest act of goodness can change more lives than we ever imagine.